Letter 37. To the Honourable Daines Barrington, Selborne, January 8th, 1778. Dear Sir, there was in this village several years ago a miserable pauper who, from his birth, was afflicted with a leprosy, as far as we are aware, of a singular kind, since it affected only the palms of his hands and the soles of his feet. This scaly eruption usually broke out twice in the year, at the spring and fall, and, by peeling away, left the skin so thin and tender that neither his hands or feet were able to perform their functions, so that the poor object was half his time on crutches, incapable of employ, and languishing in a tiresome state of indolence and inactivity. His habit was lean, lank, and cadaverous. In this sad plight he dragged on a miserable existence, a burden to himself and his parish, which was obliged to support him till he was relieved by death at more than 30 years of age. The good women, who love to account for every defect in children by the doctrine of longing, said that his mother felt a violent propensity for oysters, which she was unable to gratify, and that the black rough scurf on his hands and feet were the shells of that fish. We knew his parents, neither of which were lepers. His father in particular lived to be far advanced in years. In all ages the leprosy has made dreadful havoc among mankind. The Israelites seem to have been greatly afflicted with it from the most remote times, as appears from the peculiar and repeated injunctions given them in the Levitical law. Footnote. See Leviticus, chapter 13 and 14. End footnote. Nor was the rancour of this foul disorder much abated in the last period of their commonwealth, as may be seen in many passages of the New Testament. Some centuries ago this horrible distemper prevailed all Europe over, and our forefathers were by no means exempt, as appears by the large provision made for objects labouring under this calamity. There was a hospital for female lepers in the diocese of Lincoln, a noble one near Durham, 3 in London and Southwark, and perhaps many more in or near our great towns and cities. Moreover, some crowned heads and other wealthy and charitable personages bequeathed large legacies to such poor people as languished under this hopeless infirmity. It must, therefore, in these days be to a humane and thinking person a matter of equal wonder and satisfaction, when he contemplates how nearly this pest is eradicated, and observes that a leper now is a rare sight. He will, moreover, when engaged in such a train of thought, naturally inquire for the reason. This happy change perhaps may have originated and been continued from the much smaller quantity of salted meat and fish now eaten in these kingdoms, from the use of linen next the skin, from the plenty of better bread, and from the profusion of fruits, roots, legumes, and greens, so common in every family. 3 or 4 centuries ago, before there were any enclosures, sown grasses, field turnips, or field carrots, or hay, all the cattle which had grown fat in summer, and were not killed for winter use, were turned out soon after Michaelmas, to shift as they could through the dead months, so that no fresh meat could be had in winter or spring. Hence the marvellous account of the vast stores of salted flesh found in the larder of the eldest Spencer. Footnote. that is, 600 bacons, 80 carcasses of beef, and 600 muttons. In the days of Edward II, even so late in the spring as the 3rd of May. It was from magazines like these that the turbulent barons supported in idleness their riotous swarms of retainers, ready for any disorder or mischief. But agriculture is now arrived at such a pitch of perfection that our best and fattest meats are killed in the winter, and no man need eat salted flesh, unless he prefers it, that has money to buy fresh. One cause of this distemper might be, no doubt, the quantity of wretched fresh and salt fish consumed by the commonalty at all seasons as well as in Lent, which our poor now would hardly be persuaded to touch. The use of linen changes, shirts or shifts, in the room of sordid and filthy woolen, long worn next the skin, is a matter of neatness comparatively modern, but must prove a great means of preventing cutaneous ails. At this very time, woolen instead of linen prevails among the poorer Welsh, who are subject to foul eruptions. The plenty of good wheaten bread that now is found among all ranks of people in the south, instead of that miserable sort which used in old days to be made of barley or beans, may contribute not a little to the sweetening their blood and correcting their juices, for the inhabitants of mountainous districts, to this day, are still liable to the itch and other cutaneous disorders, from a wretchedness and poverty of diet. As to the produce of a garden, every middle-aged person of observation may perceive, within his own memory, both in town and country, how vastly the consumption of vegetables is increased. Green stalls in cities now support multitudes in a comfortable state, while gardeners get fortunes. Every decent labourer also has his garden, which is half his support as well as his delight, and common farmers provide plenty of beans, peas, and greens, for their hinds to eat with their bacon, and those few that do not are despised for their sordid parsimony, and looked upon as regardless of the welfare of their dependents. Potatoes have prevailed in this little district, by means of premiums, within these 20 years only, and are much esteemed here now by the poor, who would scarce have ventured to taste them in the last reign. Page 5.8 of 7. Our Saxon ancestors certainly had some sort of cabbage, because they call the month of February sprout kale. But long after their days, the cultivation of gardens was little attended to. The religious, being men of leisure, and keeping up a constant correspondence with Italy, were the first people among us that had gardens and fruit trees in any perfection, within the walls of their abbeys and priories. Footnote: in monasteries the lamp of knowledge continued to burn, however dimly. In them men of business were formed for the state. The art of writing was cultivated by the monks. They were the only proficients in mechanics, gardening, and architecture. See Dalrymple's Annals of Scotland. End footnote. The barons neglected every pursuit that did not lead to war or tend to the pleasure of the chase. It was not till gentlemen took up the study of horticulture themselves that the knowledge of gardening made such hasty advances. Lord Coham, Lord Illa, and Mr. Waller of Beaconsfield were some of the first people of rank that promoted the elegant science of ornamenting, without despising the superintendence of the kitchen quarters and fruit walls. A remark made by the excellent Mr. Ray in his tour of Europe at once surprises us, and corroborates what has been advanced above, for we find him observing, so late as his days, that the Italians use several herbs for salads, which are not yet, or have not been but lately used in England, namely celery, which is nothing else but the sweet smallage, the young shoots whereof, with a little of the head of the root cut off, they eat raw with oil and pepper. And further he adds, curled endive blanched is much used beyond seas, and, for a raw salad, seemed to excel lettuce itself. Now this journey was undertaken no longer ago than in the year 1663. I am, etc.,